I Should Be Writing number 375. Hi there. Welcome to I Should Be Writing, the podcast for wannabe fiction writers. I'm your host, Mur Lafferty. And it's been a weird week. I'm still sometimes hit with these stealth depression where I've never been as bad as I was, I guess 13 years ago now. So it's hard to spot when it comes across, but every once in a while, usually connected with politics, I will just lose all momentum and find it very difficult to do anything. And now that I'm on 2 drugs to stimulate myself, one for depression, one for ADD, that actually made me feel worse this week because I thought, if I've got, all this help and I'm still feeling lousy, then what's wrong with me? But I got to remember that the stuff still happens. Sometimes you just can't. Your body's going to do what it's going to do. And then you have to do what you're going to do. I haven't been very productive this week, but it's 5 o'clock on a Friday, and I thought, you know what? I said I was going to record I Should Be Writing this afternoon, and by gum, I'm going to do it. My poor, confused dog is behind me, because usually we hop in the car and go pick up my daughter around this time, but my husband's getting my daughter, so I'm here, and he's going, where the hell's my car ride? He'll survive. I am in a, they often say freelancers live in a feast or famine type world where either it's a famine and you're hustling really hard to get work, or suddenly you have a whole bunch of jobs and it's a feast and you're overworked, but you're working a lot, so that's great. And, but I've got a whole bunch of things just kind of waiting in the wings. And they're waiting for other people to make decisions. And I hate that. But if you want to make a career out of this and you don't want to go 100% self-publishing, you're going to have to realize that at some point you are going to be relying on other people's timetables to further your career. There's only so much you can do yourself. So you need to do your part, hit your deadlines, and just hope that the rest of the world's going to be working on theirs. So right now, I am waiting on a lot of things. And it would be kind of amusing if it all hit at once. They all came back with yeses at once. That would be some very creative scheduling I would have to do. But then I would enter the feast part of freelancing. But regardless of where I am in freelancing, I always have podcasting to do. So let's do that podcasting. I'm going to do a feedback show because I haven't done one in a while. Oh, one thing. I've been working on I Should Be Writing Wiki because one of my Patreon supporters pointed out that it's great that they have access to the archives, but all the archives tell them are, here's a hunk of 10 episodes. And since I've lost a good part of my blog, you don't know what is in those episodes. So I've been working on the Wiki. I'll post a link to that. Right now I have all the I Should Be Writings that are on the website. But I don't have the ones that were lost. The blog posts were lost. The files are still there. They're still available on Libsyn. But next is the big job to go through, and I'll have to listen to those and figure out at least who I interviewed and what the general topic was about. So that's going to be a lot of fun. But let's talk about that feedback thing. Here's an interesting question from Diane. Can you talk a bit about pacing? I feel like when I write, my stories, novel and novella, end up too fast and therefore too short. I can understand when someone else's story is too fast or slow, but can't figure out how to pace my own. That's an interesting question because in my experience, most people have the problem of writing too much and slowing their story down so much. And going too fast is my problem. Now, you could write like Hemingway and only put the very basic thing of what you need in your story. Although, if that had been true, it would have been the old man in the sea rows out, fights a long time with a big fish, beats it, and then other fish eat the big fish as he hauls in his prize. And life is futile. Hemingway put a few more words in there. But if you find that your pacing is too fast, there are things we do that are designed to slow down a story, especially if someone's being, if stuff's just too exciting. Like after a fight, there's sitting around and wound healing, or some people have a quiet conversation while other people survive or are sleeping off the injuries, or there's a hushed conversation during the walk after they've escaped, but they still have to do the quiet, lengthy walk to escape. There can be description and talk there. I think if you want to study another book, take a book that you think has good pacing and makes you, and a pacing you want to emulate, and just read it and make a note of what each scene is about. This is what I did for 6 Wakes. I still felt that the book was not flowing very well and the pacing was off. And so I went through and made a list of all of the points of view and what happens in every scene. And I did the cliche thing. I put them on index cards and I put them all down on the floor and I moved them around to where I thought, exciting thing, recovery, build up, exciting thing, recovery. Every single chapter is like a small story. It needs to have conflict and build up to something, and something needs to be resolved. Now, you can leave on a cliffhanger, but the pace of a book is not a steady line upwards until you hit the climax and then a steady line down. There's little ups and downs the whole way, with the tension ratcheting up and up and up. Let's look at Star Wars. It starts out with, Luke's story starts out with argument with his aunt and uncle. That's a conflict. It's very minor. It's a conflict. Luke doesn't win. And then, so that's a conflict. It's not very exciting, but it's a conflict. Then the pace slows down while he does some exposition talk with C-3PO. And then he finds out R2 is gone, so there's another conflict. And there's the race to find R2. He's hit. He gets knocked out. And then there's more recovery, exposition with Ben Kenobi. Each conflict has its own little denouement. And so make sure that you're throwing in those denouements. What is the plural of denouement? I'm not actually sure. Denouements? Anyway, I'm not good with French. Each conflict has one, and make sure that you're putting one in there for every little conflict, because that'll slow down your pacing. That was a really good question. And also, you could just be like me and not putting enough description in your story. And when I put in more description, I realize it slows the pacing down to what it needs to be. If you have very flexible summer plans, Maya from the New Orleans Writers Residency contacted me and said that they're doing their first residency where they're going to invite authors to come for free. They'll pay for up to $500 of airfare, and they'll pay a stipend to cover food and entertainment. And you get to write for how long? Yeah, you get to write for like a month in New Orleans. In the summer. Woo! But, anyway, the retreat covers food. It's very exciting. 4 weeks, live in a fancy house in the French Quarter, and write, which sounds amazing. The deadline for applications is June 1st, and the residency is July 10th through August 7th. Even though they're paying, it feels like a little tight to plan for an entire month, but you might have that freedom. So if you go to neworleanswritersresidency.org or on Twitter, NOLA Residency, N-O-L-A Residency, you can find out more about it. But it sounds like an amazing thing. I would love to try it myself. I just don't have a month to spare. So I think you guys should go for it. What do you have to lose? I've had a lot of people commiserate with me about the late in life ADD diagnosis, and I appreciate that. It's really nice to hear that I'm not alone, because I never even considered this would be a problem, and it's still a little bit weird to get my head around. Kim writes, I don't know if you've heard of James Patterson's Bookshots, which is a line of novella-length stories by various authors in print and online. It launched last summer. Do you think this is a sign of a growing trend towards shorter fiction? It might lead to more novellas in print. I think novellas are making a huge, huge comeback if they were ever hot. And if they were never hot, then they are now. I just bought a huge stack of Tor.com novellas because my local independent bookstore, Flyleaf Books, they're awesome. My local independent bookstore carries them, which I didn't see coming. So I was so excited. I just grabbed a whole bunch of them that I wanted to read. I think novellas are and need more attention. So I'm very excited that they're coming back or coming to the forefront. I think it might be due to our our diminishing attention span. I've been reading some older mysteries, and I swear I am having such trouble getting through them, especially Dorothy Sayers, because there's just like these huge blocks of text, these long paragraphs where there's so much description I get lost, and then I realize that somewhere there was a clue dropped or someone died or something happened in the middle of this paragraph, and everything today is so much sharper and shorter that I'm actually having trouble following these more intricately written mysteries. I don't even know if intricately written is the right word, but for better or for worse, I think our attention spans are shortening, and novellas will be taking advantage of that. And it's great because some people write short naturally and don't like the idea that they have to pad to get their book long enough to get noticed by a publisher. Justin writes that he has too many words. This is the opposite problem of the one we just talked about. How can I press myself from the beginning to pace my story to fit the word limit? I understand going over and cutting down, but one novel is 70K over, all plot related. That is going to be practice. Don't worry about it. Really, just if you write long, fix it in the edits. Don't worry about it this early in your career. You could always step back and say, what does this scene do to advance the plot, really? And you have to be honest with yourself. And this is where the phrase kill your darlings comes from, because you may be in love with a scene that you think says so much about your story, and then you realize it doesn't really advance your plot. It's clever, it's brilliant, it's poignant, but it doesn't advance the plot. So that's when you need to start cutting things. You can cut descriptive words, you can cut adjectives and adverbs. But really, I recommend, if you're not used to it, do it on your edit. I think, especially going into your second question, your problem is that you're questioning yourself too much and you're not finishing anything. Just tell yourself that you're allowed to write as many words as you want. You'll just edit it. I mean, a lot of people who don't like writing certain scenes will put battle scene here, put love scene here, put argument here, and then they'll keep going. And then later on they'll hate themselves, but it does help their momentum when they're writing. Second question, how can I push myself to finish that last 20%? Story has never been an issue for me. I just fizzle out or get paranoid about my word overage. Stop doing that. Don't worry. Don't worry about that. I've only been writing 3 years, so I've literally improved with each chapter. I'm to the point now where my writing is seasoned to where it needs to be, but I've always find a new project to pull me away or completely lose interest. I've recommended this book several times, and I think it's everybody needs it, because it's called Beginnings, Middles, and Ends by Nancy Kress, and she covers the different parts of each of a story. And it may sound elementary, but it's important what the beginning of a story is supposed to do, what the middle is supposed to do, and what the end is supposed to do, and how everybody usually has one section that they hate doing. And that is often a session where they will, maybe if it's the beginning, they'll skip it, or they'll write too much. They'll start the story in the wrong place. You know, if it's the middle, they'll make it too short in an effort to get through it and get to the exciting end. And if it's the end, they might just quit, like you're explaining. So I recommend seeing what Nancy Kress has to say about that, because it's an excellent book. But just remember, you're allowed to write crap, but you're also allowed to write too much. Connected, you're also allowed to write too little. Write whatever you need to write to get the story down, and then fix it on edits. Another bit of advice on cutting things down. Stephen Barnes told me this. A publisher said they needed to reduce the book word count by 10%. And so in a 100,000 word book, that's, that's 10,000 words. That's a lot. So what they did, and I say they because he was working with a co-author, and I can't remember who the co-author was. Maybe Larry Niven, I can't remember. But he said what they did is they went to every page, and they cut 10% of every page. So instead of what scene of 5,000 words can I cut, it was how can I make this writing tighter and make sure I cut, if a page averages 250 words, cut just 25 words off of every page. That's doable. And he said it was one of his best received books as being well written and tightly plotted. Kendra wants to know, she wants to write a trilogy, but with the knowledge that it's hard for a beginning writer to sell a trilogy, she thinks maybe she should work on something else, she only wants to write the trilogy. Is it better to try to find something else she's interested in writing to publish on its own, or to keep writing the trilogy in hopes that it will be so amazing that it will be published? Are there any other things I can do besides publishing work that would make me more interesting to an agent? Yeah, it's difficult to get a series published. I got a 2-book deal, so I published 2 books in a trilogy, or not a trilogy, 2 books in a series, and then they never picked up any more. Stuff happens. So make sure that the first book in the trilogy has a satisfying ending. Yeah, if it's the first book in a trilogy, there's going to be something left to want to continue the story, but you're going to have to end it well. So if you can write 1 book knowing that you're going to keep going, try to sell that. Yeah, you can sell a trilogy. It's hard. And maybe it would be better if you wrote a standalone book, but you don't want to write a standalone book. You want to write a trilogy, so write the frickin' trilogy. Write the first book. Make sure it's good, make sure it's tight, make sure it ends, and then send it out. There's really nothing else you can do to make yourself more interesting to an agent. I think agents are interested if, for example, if you're writing a medical thriller, if you're also a doctor, that is more attractive, but I don't think you should stop writing in order to get a doctorate. So, unless you mean like building a brand online, so getting Twitter followers and blog followers and people paying attention to you on social media, that might work. But really, if you don't have a good book, they're not going to care. Is querying an agent with the first 2 books an acceptable thing to do? Do you think having 2 finished books would make my odds better or worse? Can you even submit 2 books at once? No, they'll want to know the first book is finished, and they'll want to see the first book. Also, just pay attention to the submission guidelines. Agents really don't like it when people don't pay attention or don't think that the submission guidelines apply to them. Part of me thinks it's more important to write what I really want to write and not what other people will like, since I don't rely on writing for my income. Thoughts? Yes, that's exactly it. Write what you want to write. Write the trilogy, Kendra. I'm behind you on this. Write that trilogy. When you finish with the first one, polish it up, send it out to agents, and get to work on the second one. Jonathan has some questions about the magical Negro. The magical Negro in fiction is usually it was obviously designed after African Americans, but it has since been expanded to basically mean any person of color. The native shaman, the enlightened other, Bagger Vance, the oracle from the Matrix. The question is, what is your definition of a magical Negro? Is Yoda a magical Negro? How can we avoid this trope in our own fiction and yet still have our mysterious mentor? Alright, Yoda is not a magical Negro because Yoda is not a person of color. The magical Negro is a problem because it features a person of color whose only role in the film is to aid a white person toward their goal. And more often than not, they die because that is their goal. They have no agency. They have no desires of their own. They have no... They don't seem to want to use their power for themselves. So they are there to give their power to a white person to help the white person on their quest. And by quest, it can mean anything. And considering that a good part of the country was built by people using the power of black people to their own advantage and not letting slaves have their own agency. This is just, you're giving an African American a magical power is not lifting them up if you still only use that power to advance your hero, your white hero. Yoda is not a magical Negro because Yoda is not a person of color. How can you avoid this trope in your own fiction? Remember that everybody in your story needs to want something. And wanting your hero to win is not wanting something. I will put forth the caveat that there are people of color who have written about this much better than I am speaking about it, and I urge you to look it up. I will try to find some and put them in the show notes, but a lot of writers have covered the magical Negro. I mean, if you've got a person of color with magical powers, why aren't they on their own quest? Why aren't they using their magic to further their own lives? And so, just basically, if someone's there to give their power and their life so your hero can keep going, that's not good. And if it's a person of color to advance a white person, it's got that weight of years and years and years and years and years of racism behind it, saying, you're only here and powerful to help me. And that's not cool. It's very bad. So that is why it's not good. How could you still have a mysterious mentor? Make sure that your mentor wants something. Ask yourself why your mentor is not white. I'm going to recommend the classes and the writing out of the website Writing the Other. That should also give you a little bit of enlightenment on that. Is there still a place for this trope in contemporary fiction? No, because I think it's lazy writing. I mean, it's about as useful as the sexy lamp. You know, if you can take a woman out of a story and replace her with a sexy lamp and the story doesn't change at all, such as The Princess Bride, then that's a sexy lamp. Buttercup is a sexy lamp, and I will stand by it. It's a brilliantly written story as long as you like dudes who say funny things. So, yeah, it's existing as a prize, existing to give your life for the hero. That's why people don't like those tropes. The sexy lamp just tells women that your place in a story is a prize. The magical Negro says to people of color, your role is to give me your power and then either die or wander off into the sunset and don't bother me anymore. But yeah, I will find some writing about the magical Negro and put it in the show notes because I understand the trope and why it's bad, but as I'm not a person of color, I don't feel like I'm the best to talk about this, but I will put those in the show notes and urge you to continue reading. They're good questions. Alexander writes, I'm going to start querying agents and submitting novels, and I'm starting a list of materials to help me kickstart my adventure. I'm picking up self-publishing for fiction writers, the first 5 pages, and 45 master characters. Are there any other resources you would recommend for an aspiring author trying to break into the industry? I like the Writer's Digest Elements of Fiction Writing book. I have several. I mentioned the Nancy Kress book earlier. It's quite good. The book Description by Monica Wood is also good. And the woman who wrote the 45 Master Characters books that I like so much wrote a follow-up book about the relationships between the 45 Master Characters. And I found that also quite good. I can't remember the name of it, I'm sorry. But check for Victoria Lynn Schmidt. You should be able to find it. I'm to a point in my book where I'd like a lot of time to pass, and I'm not sure how to write out several years of a character's life while still making the events that happen in between remain important and pertinent to the storyline. Can you give me some examples in fiction where this has been done well, and do you have any advice on the subject? I don't know. I don't like it when stories do that. Clearly, it's done. And people make it work. But it's not my favorite thing. There's a book called Dragon Prince by Melanie Rawn. You get a woman on a journey to meet her betrothed, and there's the journey, and then there's a big party, like a big event, where lots of stuff happens, but they finally hook up and everybody's happy, and then it stops. And then, like, book 2 is 5 years later, and they mention, oh, by the way, a minor character that was still a lot of fun and you want to love, died of a fever. And these two characters hooked up and had babies. This character was unable to have babies, so she's sad. And they just, I don't know, it really felt like it took me out of it. On the other hand, Neil Stephenson has a book called Seven Eves. I haven't read it, but I've heard that you get the book 1 of, here's what happens, and then a piece of the moon breaks off and hits the earth, and then it's like 5,000 years later. I think you need to ask yourself why you're jumping ahead so much. And then just, get Dragon Prince out of the library, and you can see, I think it's book 2, the beginning, you can see how she goes over those 6 years. Whether it's, for the better or worse, but I think I don't like that aspect. But it's clearly it's used. A lot of times it'll happen between books in series. Like several years will pass between books, and then at the beginning of the second book, you'll hear what's been going on. So, it's hard for me to advise because it's not my favorite thing. Because when I really, really get involved in characters, I don't want to be taken out of their stories and then thrown into new stories when I was invested in the first stories that were being told. And I didn't feel like they were over. It didn't feel like the end of a book. But, there's Seven Eves and Dragon Prince. They both do that. And the caveat, I have not read Seven Eves. And I know you guys have been waiting for these stories, these questions a long time, and I'm sorry about that. I hope you noticed that I've been putting out podcasts every week. 1 week I should be writing, and the other week Ditch Diggers, for about a month now, and I'm proud of myself. I credit treating the ADHD, but hopefully now that I'm on a more regular schedule, I'll be able to get you content and answers a little faster. Alex writes, a constant issue in my writing is I don't know how to properly expose a character's tragedy. A constant theme in my writing is that tragedies occurred before the story start, and throughout the story the characters have to overcome their tragedies. What I can't seem to do right is completely let the audience know what the tragic past is without it feeling like an information dump. I've thought about exposing it through dialogue, but it feels stale on paper. I want the audience to know what the background tragic event is, but don't know how to present it in an interesting, realistic, and entertaining way. To reveal a past event, what ways can you do it to be gripping to the audience? Well, the first way is to have something involved with the event, something similar to the event happen in your character's life and have them react to it. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here because it's not my favorite topic, but too many people think that sexual assault is a good character-building tragedy for a woman in a story. And a lot of people say that it's done wrong so many times because they want that to be a character-defining thing, but the person never, ever acts like it affected their life afterwards. And people who have been through that, they read a room differently than someone who hasn't gone through that. They will be more aware of body language, where if someone they don't know or don't know well touches them unexpectedly, like hand on a shoulder or something, they will react to that. They will stiffen. They will get uncomfortable. I mean, things like that is what happens. And people like to throw in the sexual assault to say, this person is bad. He did this to this person. But they don't actually show what it did to the victim's life. So, on a much less difficult conversation, one of the books up for the Hugo this year is A Closed and Common Orbit. And it's an awesome book. I loved it. But it's about two women who make a friendship and start living together, and you don't quite get why one woman is being so generous to the other one, but then you get her backstory. So you get a chapter of the current day with the newcomer, and then you get a backstory of her host. And so there's a scene where they give, the host and her boyfriend give the new woman a mechanical pet. And she's playing with it, trying to figure it out, and she's like, I can't remember exactly what she says, but she asks why a mechanical pet. And the woman just looks very uncomfortable and says, I don't like animals. Or she doesn't like dogs or something. Again, she just looks uncomfortable and then says she does not want a pet. She doesn't like pets. And then when we go back to the flashback, we see, I don't even think it went directly there. We got a flashback chapter, but in one of the flashback chapters, you find out exactly why she doesn't like dogs. And there's a real good reason why she doesn't like dogs. But the first thing we see about that is pointing out, why did you get me a mechanical pet? And her discomfort with that. This woman had a very difficult childhood. She was basically genetically engineered to be a slave, to be a child slave. And her story is how she breaks free. It's pointed out a couple of times how her name is Pepper, and she loves spicy food. And that is not even, you wouldn't say that's a flag about a tragedy. And then you find out that, if you've got genetically engineered child slaves, then you're not going to worry about feeding them anything but, a protein shake. So she's raised on cups of, proteins and vitamins. She barely tastes anything during her first several years. And whenever something that's not one of these things, she tastes them, it's like mind-blowing to her. Even if it's bad. She just relishes anything that gives her mouth a sensation of taste. And so you find out later she chooses her name because of this connection she has to flavor. So I think A Closed and Common Orbit is a great thing. It's clearly flashback. It's all told via flashback, but you can see when you read about Pepper in the present day, the things she experiences that harken back to her backstory, because it's just right there in black and white. So that might be something good to read if you like science fiction, about how you can show how a tragedy shapes someone to act differently later on in their life. And sometimes when we feel like something is clumsy or stale, don't worry about it. It's a first draft. Just write it. And if it feels stale, then it could just be because you already knew what the secret was. I mean, I thought that when I was writing my mystery that the person who did it was just like neon on the page, and no one figures it out. And then when they do see who did it and they look back, they see all the clues were there. So I did my job, but I didn't feel like I did my job because I knew who the murderer was the whole way through. So what you think is stale or obvious may not be the case. So if you want to put it out through dialogue, just don't make it too on the nose. Don't make it, oh, well, I don't like animals because of this experience as a child. You can have them be reluctant to talk about animals, change the subject. You could have them bring up something else. You can have them point out the things they do like instead of animals. And then gradually get into the story of why. Most people, if they're recounting a trauma, they're not going to go into the dirty details to start out with. They're going to give maybe basic information. My mom died when I was 5. Instead of, my mother was killed in front of me by a serial killer who then kidnapped me and tortured me. I mean, different levels of detail are appropriate at different levels of the story. A listener, Jonathan, is writing to tell me he's getting his first rejections. He's a working writer. Way to go, Jonathan. Keep going. Guys, pardon me for sounding like I'm trying to get my words on a poster with a kitten or Morgan Freeman on it, but the only people who do not get rejections are people who do not write. And probably John Scalzi. But he got rejections for his nonfiction. Claire wrote me back in January, and I meant to put this on a show, and I didn't, and she's been waiting, and I'm so sorry, Claire. I'm so sorry. I'm itching to get started on a new project, except I'm not sure how. I've got a setting, character, and general tone in mind, but not much else. Even those are pretty shallow at the moment. I know if I start writing from almost nothing, I will get frustrated and discouraged quickly. Hypothesis tested via many NaNoWriMos. With my previous book, I started from, I won't give her elevator pitch, but process of fleshing it out in a more organic way took forever, 2 years, and I binned all of it and started again with an additional POV character. I've learned a lot from writing that book, but not how to start efficiently. I'd love any advice on fleshing out ideas, brainstorming techniques, etc. Do you have books or websites you could suggest to help with that? Can you start talking about your process when you're starting work on a new idea? It's maybe more about setting a routine for myself for a few months of writing exercises or something. P.S. Not the artist way, please. I've tried it and it's too religious for me. That's totally fair. I have to go into the artist way with a dose of, with a grain of salt, because I'm not religious, but I try to look past that part. I like to start with a basic conflict in a character's life. I wish I could remember. I started on a new book recently, and it's another space murder mystery, not in the world of 6 Weeks, but it's a murder mystery that happens on a spaceship, a space station, and I can't remember what triggered the idea. I can't remember for the life of me. But I knew I wanted to do a story like set in a diner on a space station with lots of different alien races, and I'd had a lot of other things. I've had books in my mind for like years and years now that I keep thinking, I need to get this down. And then suddenly these ideas hit me and I don't really know where they're going, but I just sat and I thought about it for about an hour, and then I started writing. And then I went back and thought, okay, this might be good. And then I tried to do an outline. And the outline was just, this person does this, and this is their goal, but this is what's standing in their way, and this is what happens, and here's our antagonist, and also there are these characters. And so I got my basic outline down, and now I'm working toward that outline, and as different ideas come to me, I'm throwing more into the outline and more into the story. And I'm not sure if I've ever written this way before, but I'm enjoying it. So, Claire, I'm going to mention beginnings, middles, and ends again, because it sounds like you might need to work on the beginning part of that. But, yeah, right, I just try to think of a basic conflict in someone's life. If you've already got a character, what made that character? What in their world has changed to put them where they are, for better or for worse? So I hope that helps get you started, and I'm sorry for sitting on this question for so long. I think it was such a good question, and I didn't do a feedback show for so long that I wanted to give more attention to it. That is it for the feedback. I'm sorry for sitting on those for so long, but as I said, I'm going to be better with being more regular with podcasting and feedback. So thank you all for listening. Thank you for supporting via Patreon. Remember, you can get the I Should Be Writing book, which is coming out in just a couple of months. You can pre-order them, I think in all English-speaking countries. I think it's a worldwide release. So you can pre-order them. And it's called, strangely enough, I Should Be Writing. And supporting on Patreon is patreon.com/mightymur. You can see the blog at murverse.com. And if you want to email me your feedback questions, that is mightymur@gmail.com. Oh, also, if you want to follow me on Twitter, I'm at mightymur. And I've started to try to post on Instagram, which is mightymur2. I don't know who has mightymur, or if I registered it under an email I no longer have. I don't know. I am working to put my show on many different outlets. So, yes, you can get it on iTunes, but you can also get it on TuneIn and Stitcher and many other places. So if you like to go different places to get your podcast, mine are there now. So that's a happy thing. And that's it. We're done. I'm going to sign off now because it is Friday night and I'm going to go eat some pizza. But then tomorrow I'm going to get up and I'm going to write again. And so should you, because you should be writing.